Good morning, everyone. Dr. Aparna Sudhakar, Assistant Professor from the Department of General Medicine. Today we'll be discussing about rheumatoid arthritis. I'll be discussing this topic under the following subheading. Basically, rheumatoid arthritis is a chronic inflammatory arthritis. Arthritis meaning there is inflammation of the joint associated with pain and swelling, and it is a chronic process. The characteristic feature of this type of arthritis is that it is a symmetric and a peripheral polyarthritis. Poly meaning two or more joints are involved, and this involving the peripheral joints, predominantly the joints of the hands and the feet, and it is a symmetric type of arthritis. It often results in joint damage and physical disability. It is characteristically associated with a variety of extra-articular manifestations like fatigue, formation of subcutaneous nodules, involvement of the lungs, the pericardium, the nerves, the peripheral nerves, vasculitis, and hematological abnormalities. So apart from it being a chronic inflammatory arthritis, it has a plethora of extra-articular manifestations also. So this demonstrates the characteristic symmetric peripheral polyarthritis. It is predominantly of an autoimmune etiology. If you look into the epidemiology, it is more common among females compared to males. Most of the autoimmune diseases follow this rule, probably due to a role of the underlying hormone, that is estrogen, or because of which can enhance an immune response. The cause is exactly not known, but as in other autoimmune diseases, there is a slightly higher prevalence among females, thus women compared to men. Now again, the age group, slightly in the middle, that is in the mid-age group, between 30s to your 60s. We look into the pathogenesis of this disease. There is still an incomplete understanding of the pathogenic pathways of the process, but it is predominantly an autoimmune reaction, inflammation targeting the synovial tissue and the underlying cartilage or bone. So basically, there is sinoinflammation, proliferation, there is bony erosion, and the underlying cartilage becomes thinned. Now, this cartilage is what protects the joint from wear and tear. So, this cartilage is targeted, and therefore, there is arthritis. Because of this immune dysregulation, that is triggering of an autoimmune process, there is release of various inflammatory mediators causing inflammation of the synovium. This is because of an interplay of environment, immunological as well as genetic factors. The exact cause is not known, but you have various factors that come into play. So there are autoantibodies that are produced, and they are going to target the underlying synovium, causing damage to the synovial tissue, the underlying articular cartilage as well as the bone. So in the stage 1 of arthritis, we can divide it into 4 stages. Primarily, early on, there are autoantibodies that are produced and they target the synovial tissue. They cause inflammation of the underlying joint, and in the final stage, the joint becomes permanently deformed. That results in disability. We have the synovium, which is targeted, the synovium becomes inflamed, the underlying articular cartilage is degraded, and there are bony erosions. The primary antibodies that we can discuss pertaining to rheumatoid arthritis will be rheumatoid factor antibodies. Rheumatoid factor antibodies and anti-cycling secreted polypeptide antibodies, anti-CCP antibodies. Now, according to some studies, these antibodies were found in individuals who had rheumatoid arthritis and later on, even several years before the clinical disease actually was detected. Though the role of these antibodies is not fully explained, now we're primarily dealing with the production of the antibodies RS and anti-CCP as a probable etiology. These anti-CCP antibodies are going to target certain cyclic citrullineated polypeptides. That is the citrullineated portions of proteins like keratin, fibrinogen, etc. that form an important part of the synovium and the joint tissue. There are also other minor autoantibodies that target type 2 collagen, the cartilage, etc. And the studies have shown that Compared to non-smokers, smokers have a higher incidence of developing rheumatoid arthritis. So this can be because smokers have higher levels of these cholinergic peptides, so that can trigger the formation of these autoantibodies. And certain exposure, environmental factors like exposure to silicon dust, mineral oil also can trigger the formation of these anti-CCP antibodies. All of these are based on several studies describing the epidemiology. So again, smokers, exposure to certain chemical toxins, women, all of them have a higher risk of developing RA. Skip this slide. Their studies have also postulated the involvement of microbes in the pathogenesis, though not very clearly elucidated. Now what happens? Autoantibodies trigger an inflammatory response. So basically every inflammatory response has certain inflammatory cells that is going to be primarily the autoreactive T cells. So the T cells come into play, they release a number of interleukins, that are their cytokines, and they activate further inflammatory response, resulting in joint inflammation and destruction of the underlying cartilage. The B cells are going to release the autoantibodies, primarily the anti-rheumatoid factor RF as well as anti-CCP antibodies. These antibodies form immune complexes and further perpetuate or further release certain cytokines that promote inflammation. Again, macrophages are another group of inflammatory cells that are going to release important inflammatory markers, cytokines like tumor necrosis factor. The tumor necrosis factor is going to activate angiogenesis. So this angiogenesis promotes the inflammatory cells to survive further in the joints and causing further inflammation. The osteoclasts get activated by this inflammatory process. What these osteoclasts are going to do is to resorb the bone. So apart from the synovium, the cartilage, the underlying subchondral bone, that is the bone immediately adjacent to the articular cartilage, is going to be resorbed because of activation of the osteoclast by various cytokines like tumor necrosis factor, interleukins. Certain studies have shown that in people with rheumatoid arthritis, apart from the peripheral peripheral joint, the entire bone, that is the entire skeleton, which has a generalized osteoporosis, probably because of this osteoclast activation. Again, bone formation is also suppressed because of this chronic inflammation. Tumor necrosis factor alpha again plays an important role in suppressing the bone formation. So therefore, the underlying bone is also targeted. This picture sums up the pathophysiological mechanism. What happens is, due to certain genetic environmental predisposing factors, there is an autoimmune or an immune dysregulation that happens. The T cells, which play an important role in the inflammatory cascade, they release various cytokines like interleukin 17, tumor necrosis factor, that are going to cause further inflammatory response. You have your CD8 plus killer T cells, CD4 plus T cells, which are the helper cells, which then you have the B cells, which release rheumatoid factor antibodies and anti-CCP antibodies. Then you have tumor necrosis factor alpha that plays an important role in sustaining the immune response. Here you see the osteoclast, which gets activated, and the osteoblast is suppressed. This again shows pathogenesis. We have genetic factors, environmental factors that sustain a chronic inflammatory response within the joint. If you see in this picture, you have the healthy joint with an intact synovium, with an intact articular cartilage, and the underlying bone is normal. Whereas on the opposite side, you have a arthritic joint where the underlying synovium is inflamed. You have various inflammatory cells within the synovium, which sustains the inflammatory response due to the release of various cytokines. The underlying bone is also damaged. The cartilage is also damaged. We have T cells, the B cells that and the macrophages that are responsible for this inflammatory cascade. Remember, B cells releasing autoantibodies, T cells releasing various cytokines, important objectives, human necrosis factor alpha. Now, genetic factors, again, we discussed, they play an important role in triggering the immune response. Genetic factors is basically HLA association. Remember, HLA DRB1 association with rheumatoid arthritis. The people who have this HLA-DR1 gene, they have a higher risk of developing rheumatoid arthritis compared to the general population. There is a certain other gene I will not be discussing currently. So the genetic and the ethnic factors are depicted in this picture, how it shows how in certain belts you have higher incidence of rheumatoid arthritis compared to other areas. The environmental factors were already touched upon briefly before. We have cigarette smoking, a probable virus etiology. So cigarette smoking because of the formation of citrulline proteins, therefore development of anti-CCP antibodies are higher in these set of individuals. So women especially, they have a higher risk. Viral etiology, probably Epstein-Barr virus, can be associated with the triggering of the inflammatory response. This is again to some of the inflammatory or the immunopathogenic pathway. We have genetic factors and environmental factors that trigger the autoimmune response. What happens when you look at the joint? The synovial membrane which covers articular surface. This is the thin layer of connective tissue that has type A as well as type B synovial cells. So these are composed of this fibroblast or the type B synoviocytes, the fibroblasts derived. They produce the structural components of the joint, that is collagen, fibronectin, laminin, etc. So the autoantibodies are going to target these components of the tissue, namely collagen and the other proteins. So this is the articular surface of the bone, which is covered by the articular cartilage, which is surrounded by synovial fluid produced by the synovial membrane. And the entire thing is covered by the joint capsule. So here you have the articular cartilage covering the bone and bony end, that is the articulating surfaces, which is surrounded by synovial fluid, and this has a synovial membrane. That is, the synovial fluid is produced by the synovial membrane, and the entire thing is surrounded by the fibrous capsule, the articular by the joint capsule that protects the bone from further wear and tear. Look at the synovial fluid is actually an ultrafiltrate of the blood, and it lines the articulating surfaces. The pathological hallmark, when you look into a joint which is affected by rheumatoid arthritis, the primary hallmarks would be synovial inflammation, there is proliferation, bone erosion, and thinning of the articular cartilage. Here you see the inflamed synovial membrane and the underlying articular cartilage being degraded or destroyed, and the underlying bone is also eroded. Now we look into the clinical features. The incidence of rheumatoid arthritis is going to be in the mid-years, that is late adulthood or early adulthood to late adulthood, which is around 30 to 60. So 25 to 55 years is where rheumatoid arthritis incidence is going to be higher. Now, characteristically, these individuals have early morning stiffness. So the symptoms are because of joint inflammation. Early morning stiffness lasting for more than 1 hour, which eases with physical activity, is one of the cardinal symptoms. One of the classic symptoms of rheumatoid arthritis So we usually ask this question, that is, whether the patient has early morning stiffness or not, and this when a patient who is likely to have rheumatoid arthritis comes to an OPD. The earliest joints to be involved are the joints of the hands and the feet. These are the small joints. So because rheumatoid arthritis is primarily a chronic peripheral polyarthritis, the earliest joints to be involved will be the small joints of the hands and the feet. Joint involvement initially may be monoarticular, that is, just a single joint may be involved, or oligoarticular, that is, less than or equal to 4 joints, or it can be polyarticular. So that is, at presentation, some people come with only one joint involvement, or in most cases, there will be multiple joint involvement in a symmetric fashion. The prominent or the most common joints that are involved would be the wrist joint, the metacarpophalangeal joint, and the proximal interphalangeal joint. So what you have to remember here is the distal interphalangeal joint, which is typically affected in osteoarthritis, whereas the proximal interphalangeal joint, the PIP joint, is typically involved in rheumatoid arthritis. So if you see, it is a symmetric polyarthritis, peripheral arthritis, where axial skeleton is usually preserved. Here you have the large joint as well as the small joint involvement in a symmetric fashion, but the most common joints will be the hands and the feet joints. These are the small joints. If you look at the fingers, sometimes we can have what are known as trigger fingers. That is because of the synovitis, the tenosynovitis of the tendon. So the finger is actually kept in a flexed position, that is known as trigger finger, which is again a hallmark of rheumatoid arthritis. And with time, if the inflammation goes unchecked, they can develop irreversible deformity. If you look at the hand joint, subluxation of the metacarpophalangeal joint of the hand can result in ulnar deviation of the hand. Previously, when treatment of rheumatoid arthritis was not very popular or it was not well described, people started developing, people used to have a lot of deformities. And these are some of the classic deformities described, though now because of advancements in treatment modalities, it has come down in a big way. Swan-neck deformity and bottom-ear deformity are two classic deformities associated to rheumatoid arthritis. Swan-neck is when there is extension of the proximal interphalangeal joint and flexion of the DIP joint. Flexion of the proximal interphalangeal joint with hyperextension of the DIP joint is known as bottom-ear deformity. Now, the first interphalangeal joint, when there is hyperextension of the first interphalangeal joint, that is of the thumb joint, with subluxation of the first metacarpophalangeal joint, that is known as Z-line deformity of the thumb. So here this is bottom-ear deformity when there is hyperextension of the proximal interphalangeal joint, and when there is flexion of the proximal interphalangeal joint, and there is hyperextension of the distal interphalangeal joint, that is known as bottom-ear deformity, and there is hyperextension of the proximal interphalangeal joint and flexion of the distal interphalangeal joint, that is known as Swan-neck deformity, as depicted in this picture. Because of subluxation of the metacarpophalangeal joint, there is ulnar deviation of the hand. This is Z-line deformity of the thumb because of the subluxation of the first MCP joint with hyperextension of the proximal first interphalangeal joint. This is tendon tenosynovitis causing what are known as trigger fingers. Again, piano key movement is one terminology which is commonly associated with rheumatoid arthritis. Now, if you see in the feet, you look at the feet as a late complication, what happens is due to chronic destruction of the joints, the mid-tarsal joint and the axial joint, they can develop a plan of flat feet. Usually, the large joint are involved later on in the disease. Some people can present it along with the involvement of the small joint. Involvement of the spine, that is, The vital spine predominantly, what happens is epilateral joints can be involved, which can result in compressive neuropathy, but it is rare nowadays because of advancements in treatment. The index spine, remember, the cervical spine can be affected, otherwise the spine is usually not affected. Rarely it can affect the thoracic and the lumbar spine. The involvement of the temporomandibular joint can occur or can also occur. Apart from the small joint, there some of the other joints that can be associated. Remember the spine, that is the accentroaxial joint, as well as the temporomandibular joint. In this case, you can develop what are the armor tools that can be flat feet. This is one picture which shows some of the deformities associated with rheumatoid arthritis. This flex CIP joint, this is known as armor tool. There is deviation of the tool and flat feet can also develop. Now we look into the extra-articular manifestation. Now, under articular manifestation, remember the peripheral rheumatic polyarthritis. Under extra-articular manifestation, people who have history of smoking, or people who have high serum titers of rheumatoid factor or anti-CCP antibodies are found to have higher incidence of extra-articular manifestation. The most common of which are subcutaneous nodules, cutaneous manifestations, Sjogren's syndrome, pulmonary nodules, and anemia. Constitutional symptoms like low-grade fever, fatigue, malaise can occur because of the chronic inflammatory process. Subcutaneous nodules are seen in approximately one-third of the individuals, especially people who have high level of disease activity, because people who have joint erosion and higher degrees of disease activity, higher levels of serum rheumatoid factor antibodies. Now, these nodules are usually firm in consistency. They are non-tender nodules adherent to the tendon or the underlying periosteum. They usually benign. The sites are usually in areas which are subjected to repeated trauma, like the forearm, the Achilles tendon, that is the back of the ankle, and sacral prominence. So these are some of the sites where they can develop these rheumatoid nodules. These are subcutaneous nodules attached to the underlying tendon or to the periosteum. They are firm and non-tender in consistency. You can also have lung nodules, pleural nodules, pericardial nodules, peritoneal nodules. This is a classic picture for rheumatoid nodules. These are firm and non-tender nodules. These nodules can ulcerate, otherwise they are generally benign. Areas which are subjected to much friction. These are usually the sites where these nodules develop. Secondly, Sjogren's is another important extra-articular manifestation. Sjogren's is supposed to be associated with xerostomia, keratoconjunctivitis, pica. That is dry mouth and dryness of the eyes. We look into the lung manifestation. Pleuritis, pleural involvement resulting in the formation of pleural effusion can cause chest pain and breathlessness. They can also develop interstitial lung disease. Rheumatoid arthritis can be associated with interstitial lung disease that can cause crackles, typical crackles, shortness of breath, dry cough as a clinical manifestation. Again, these extrapulmonary manifestations are associated with individuals who have history of smoking or higher disease activity in the form of more prominent joint involvement and higher serum rheumatoid factor antibody titers. The involvement of the lung is usually associated with a poorer prognosis or more refractory disease. That is, a disease which is more aggressive in nature and more refractory to treatment. Pulmonary nodules, as we described among the nodule formation, pulmonary nodules can also be formed, which can be single nodules or multiple nodules. When we look into the cardiac manifestation, pericarditis is the most common cardiac manifestation. Though all the layers of the heart can be involved, pericarditis is most common, associated with chest pain, with breathlessness. Cardiomyopathy can occur, usually detected using an echocardiography. Now, may not be always symptomatic. Again, rheumatoid arthritis can be associated with nodule formation in the myocardium. Rheumatic arthritis can cause valvular heart disease also, and the most common valvular abnormality associated with rheumatic arthritis is mitral regurgitation. Next would be involvement of the vessels, such as inflammation of the vessels causing vasculitis, rheumatic vasculitis, rheumatoid vasculitis. Though the incidence is not high, individuals who have multiple joint involvement, we should look out for precursor-based vasculitis also, formation, ulceration, lower extremity ulceration, petechiae purpura, or polyneuropathies because of systemic vasculitis should be looked out for. This is a picture of distal gangrene, ulceration, petechiae, and purpura. Involvement of nerves can cause polyneuropathy. The hematological manifestations being a chronic inflammatory process that causes normocytic normophobic anemia, which is characteristic of anemia of chronic disease. Platelets, which are an acute phase reactant, can be elevated. So thrombocytosis can be seen in individuals with rheumatoid arthritis. A triad involving nodular rheumatoid arthritis. Rheumatoid arthritis with splenomegaly and neutropenia is known as Felty's triad or Felty's syndrome. Previously, it was very common because rheumatoid arthritis treatment was not very clear in the olden times. So this was a common triad: splenomegaly with neutropenia, anemia, and arthritis. Usually seen in the later stages of severe RA, which goes unchecked, incidence is declining because of earlier and better treatment availability. Felty syndrome, we have splenomegaly with rheumatoid nodules and thrombocytopenia, neutropenia, and anemia. Lymphoma can also occur as an extracellular manifestation. People with rheumatoid arthritis have a twofold or fourfold increased risk. The lymphoma is most commonly associated with the diffuse large B-cell lymphoma, DLBCL. These are the extraarticular manifestations. Sjogren's syndrome associated with periconjunctivitis, the xerostomia, involvement of the lungs in the form of pruritus, involvement of the heart in the form of myocardial nodules, pericarditis resulting in cardiomyopathy, the GI system in the form of GI vasculitis, involvement of the entire skeleton, the bone skeleton resulting in osteoporosis, formation of cutaneous nodules, subcutaneous nodules, neurological involvement because of the systemic vasculitis causing polyneuropathy or because of the axial dislocation causing cervical myopathy. The most common cause of death is usually cardiovascular disease because of increased risk of and incidence of coronary artery disease and atherosclerosis in individuals with rheumatoid arthritis. The most common cause of death if it can occur is usually cardiovascular disease. Probably also because of rheumatic involvement, rheumatoid involvement of the myocardium and the pericardium. Osteoporosis can occur due to associated conditions. Probably after treatment for rheumatoid arthritis with the use of steroids, which is the primary modality of treatment for individuals with chronic inflammatory process. Steroid use can also cause increased likelihood of this osteoporosis. And hypoandrogenism, either because of this chronic inflammatory process or because of glucocorticoid therapy, which suppresses the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. It can cause hypoandrogenism. Rather than that, the luteinizing hormone, the testosterone hormone levels will be lower. How do you diagnose? You have an important criteria, which is known as the ACR-EULAR criteria for rheumatoid arthritis, under which you look into the number of joints which are involved. So you should check each joint, whether they are tender, whether there is any joint swelling, whether there is any warmth over that joint, any count the number of joints. So if the joint involvement is just one large joint, that is either shoulder joint, elbow joint, hip joint, or ankle joint, these are the large joints. If there is only one large joint involvement, then the score is 0. 2 to 10 large joints, the score is 1. Involvement of 1 to 3 small joints, the score is 2. 2 to 10 small joints, the score becomes 3. And more than 10 joints, the score is 5. Of these, more than 10 joints, one should at least be a small joint. If you look into the serology, negative RS, negative anti-CPA. Negative anti-CCP, the score is going to be 0. If there is low positive RS or low positive anti-CCP, the score is going to be 2. If there is high positive RS, high positive anti-CCP, the score is going to be 3. Then you look at the acute phase reactions, that is ARC and ASR. If they are normal, the score is 0. If one is abnormal, the score becomes 1. And if the duration of symptom is less than 6 weeks, that is 1.5 months, the score is 0, whereas more than 1.5 months, the score is 1. So basically, if you suspect the individual should have rheumatoid arthritis, you look at the number of joints which are involved, and RS, anti-CCP antibody level, and ESR and CRP as the investigation, and look at the duration of the symptoms. If the score is 6 or more, then it shows that it is definitive for rheumatoid arthritis. So this is the 2010 revised ACR REULAC classification criteria for RA, which includes both clinical as well as laboratory and radiological findings. Higher anti-CCP antibody titer is usually suggested or it is predicted for a worse outcome. Anti-CCP antibodies are usually more specific compared to the RS antibodies. Because RA factor can also be found in other connective tissue diseases and chronic infections. Therefore, anti-CCP is more specific for rheumatoid arthritis. If you look into the synovial fluid, if the joint there is swelling and there is effusion, you can take a sample of the synovial fluid and send for analysis. This shows an inflammatory picture, that is, with the WBC count in the synovial fluid will be between 5,000 to 50,000. More than less than 2,000, you will usually see a non-inflammatory state. So this is the typical inflammatory picture of the synovial fluid analysis, and we have more neutrophils in the synovial fluid. So if you have a doubt, if there is only a single joint involvement, and if you have a doubt whether it is septic arthritis or gouty arthritis or osteoarthritis,